The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the show. Before we get into it, I want to mention that we need to issue a correction. This does happen about once a year, Lewis, and it's disappointing it's happening so early this year, but that's okay. The other day, I misattributed a quote to Bill O'Reilly. I meant to attribute the quote to Joe Biden and discuss Bill O'Reilly's reaction to that quote when talking about, it was during the segment about Bill O'Reilly talking about Asians are usually hardworking. That wasn't the quote. It was one from a while back. Apologies. A mistake was made, and we apologize sincerely, Louis.
If you or any of your family members died as a consequence of this mistake, we sincerely apologize.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. 5 mistakes that George W. Bush made in terms of policy that President Obama is continuing. There's a great article on Alternet. I encourage you to take a look at it, and it outlines 5 policies that President Bush started or exacerbated that President Obama has either continued or actually doubled down on. Number 1 is drones, which we've been talking about. We talked about it yesterday. We'll talk about it more today, so I won't go more into it now. But that is a policy that, as progressives, we would like a Democratic president to stop, and President Obama has not stopped. Number 2, warrantless wiretapping. George W. Bush, of course, blowing up warrantless wiretapping after 9/11, President Obama continuing and increasing it in many cases, and basically making a lot of those Patriot Act provisions permanent, Lewis.
Yes.
Proxy detentions. The Obama administration continues to use foreign countries to detain and interrogate suspects. The details are changing a little bit from how it worked during George W. Bush, but the practice is basically still the same, which is you use other security forces to do a lot of dirty work. The most recent iterations of this that I've read about involve using countries like Nigeria and Djibouti to detain suspects that the U.S. wants to interrogate. The Post reported on one that happened about a year ago where a man from Eritrea revealed he had been questioned in a Nigerian jail by what a U.S. interrogator described as a, quote, dirty team of American agents who ignored the suspect's right to remain silent, the request for lawyers, so on and so forth. This is a problem. We need to, for all the good things President Obama is doing, this is not acceptable.
This is pretty bad. I agree.
4, Guantanamo. We know that Guantanamo not being closed is not President Obama's fault. Of course, the biggest mistake he may have made was being so explicit in saying he would close Guantanamo during his first term, which he was not able to do. It does symbolize a failure to reject that aspect of the Bush administration's approach to terrorism. I still consider it a problem, although I don't blame the fact that it's still open specifically on President Obama.
Right, but if you don't have the foresight to realize that you're not going to be able to keep your promise, come on.
Fair enough. And number 5, indefinite detention. This issue, I would say above all others, and the alternate article agrees with me, is a loud and clear message that the Obama administration is essentially, I don't know if I want to use the term preparing or already bought into an endless war on terror. And when we talk about the drone stuff, which is, hey, in fact, the entire context of the defense of drone usage assumes and is informed by an endless, ongoing war on terror that knows no country boundaries, for sure.
You got it. Now, what if warrantless wiretapping meant that there were less incorrect proxy detentions and indefinite detentions?
It's an interesting hypothetical. Do we have any evidence that that is the case? No.
But we have no evidence of the contrary.
What if, to quote Alex Jones, chimpanzees dancing on the head of a pin reduces the number of civilian drone deaths, right? I mean, these are hypotheticals.
That's true.
Natan, what about the argument some people make, which is that President Obama is to some extent stuck with some of this policy from George W. Bush, and it's unfair to blame him for these things?
I mean, it is possible that if he had rescinded a lot of these orders and policies that he would then be attacked by the right, although I would argue that in the last election it probably wouldn't have come up as much just because the economy was the main issue. But I think that he probably thinks that these policies are good ones,
yeah,
and it's under the radar, and it's certainly something that's not being widely reported in the media. But I don't think it's something where, for a political reason, he hasn't gone back on them.
So basically, do you agree with that, Lewis, that if he wanted to pick a new direction here, he could, but that either there's no interest in it or the pressure from those who are other forces within political government wouldn't allow a change.
I think he is stuck with these because of Bush in a way. Would he have put these in place if Bush hadn't? I doubt it. But he's probably in a position where everyone who works for the U.S. government in terms of security is saying
it's assumed this is the list.
These really need to stay in place.
This is the laundry list of what's done.
He probably hasn't even thought about it.
Let's talk about drones a little bit. We've been talking about drones off and on, and I think it's a hugely important subject. I got an interesting audience suggestion of a way to frame the drone discussion that may, I don't know if it would change the way our audience feels about it, but it may contextualize it in a relevant way. What would people in the U.S. think if Mexico was targeting a well-known drug lord who was in the United States? Okay, this is a Mexican drug lord who is in the United States. The U.S. is not aware where he is, and they target that drug lord with a drone strike. Now, the drone strike is successful. It kills the drug lord, but it takes out a building or a city block, and it does some collateral damage, including civilian deaths. Would we then be so quick as some of us are now? Maybe you in some ways, Lewis, although not in the broad scheme of things. If that was the case, would we say, we understand there were some civilian there was civilian collateral damage, but Mexico knew where this guy was, they had the technology to get him, and they did get him. That's okay. It's okay that they flew this drone into our borders. Would we sit idly by the same way that we do now?
I think we might if it was Osama bin Laden who was in that building.
Well, that's not the hypothetical I outlined.
I know. No, we would not.
Natan, do you want to comment on this?
It seems like the public and the political establishment would go totally ape nuts over this. Now, I think that if Mexico were doing this as part of an anti-terror campaign and this person that they killed was a serious national security threat, then I think it would be just as justified internationally or not justified as what the U.S. is doing.
I think that's the key. It would be equally unjustified. It would be just as unjustified as us saying that we are involved in this, because this is really what the global war on terror is about, ladies and gentlemen. It's about eliminating these borders, eliminating formal declarations of war. The war on terror knows no physical boundaries, and therefore the same way that our drones are over Pakistan and misidentifying a farmer who is simply tilling soil at night, a common practice there, as someone bearing a bomb and kills them with a drone, Mexico just was getting one of their guys who happened to be here in the U.S.
There would be total outrage across the board.
No question about it. Let's take a step back. If Republicans and some others believed that, what was that thing, the United Nations treaty that was of note recently, where some Americans didn't like it because they said it was eliminating our sovereignty to the UN or something like that? It was some health-related thing.
It was basically a treaty that the Senate, or a resolution, a non-binding resolution that the Senate was going to pass that basically just said that the UN, they're approving of the UN sort of accepting what the Americans have already done with the Americans with Disabilities Act, but they rejected it.
Yeah, if that was an impingement on the sovereignty of this country, Mexican drones taking out a known drug lord, give me a break, ladies and gentlemen. This is what we're doing overseas. That's what we're doing. It's plain and simple.
Right.
Okay, General Stanley McChrystal, who resigned after the incident involving a Rolling Stone article that outlined some criticisms that he and some of his staffers had made about some in the Obama administration. Certainly no tree-hugging, lefty, bleeding-heart liberal peacenik. He was on MSNBC's Morning Joe. He was asked about weapons and assault weapons. Here's the answer he had. I think he is eloquent, and I think he's making sense, and conservatives don't like him for it. And they say, hey, he is part of the group that wants to take your guns. Of course he would say that. Take a listen to this.
Yeah, I spent a career carrying typically either an M16 and then later an M4 carbine. And an M4 carbine fires a .223 caliber round, which is 5.56 millimeter, at about 3,000 feet per second. When it hits a human body, the effects are devastating. It's designed to do that. And that's what our soldiers ought to carry. I personally don't think there's any need for that kind of weaponry on the streets, and particularly around the schools in America. I believe that we've got to take a serious look I understand everybody's desire to have whatever they want, but we've got to protect our children, we've got to protect our police, we've got to protect our population, and I think we've got to take a very mature look at that.
So we're talking about background checks, we're talking about banning certain types of assault weapons, we're talking about trying to reduce the number of these guns and the ammunition that feeds them in our society. First of all, do you think that's possible? And would you support legislation? Would you, I don't know, go around the country and actually be very vocal about this?
I think serious action is necessary.
So there it is, Stanley McChrystal. And it's funny because Stanley McChrystal is essentially the epitome of what fits the kind of patriotic military career officer meme that is very popular in the U.S. It's probably somewhat more popular among the American right than it is among the American left. And the American right is so quick to take this guy for this one comment and basically completely throw him under the bus. Hey, he's one of those military guys that we need our guns to defend ourselves from. What does he know? He was not in civilian situations. He was only in military situations. What does he know about what guns are needed in civilian situations? The right doesn't care. They throw this hero, essentially. He was a hero to them up until hours ago.
Yeah.
He's under the bus
If
now.
you say anything that does not fit into their alternate reality, you're out.
How quickly things and loyalties change.
You are an enemy.
Keith Ratliff. Keith Ratliff was a YouTube channel producer for the YouTube channel FPS Russia. He has been shot and killed in an apparent homicide, according to Georgia police. This is an interesting story, a sad story, a tragic story. He was a producer for this gun enthusiast channel on YouTube called FPS Russia. He was found dead with a single gunshot wound to the head at his business last week. Police in Georgia are investigating the homicide. 32-year-old Franklin County resident Keith Ratliff is the victim. His wife said it's really heartbreaking. Of course, how can you not sympathize with her for this tragedy? Authorities, of course, found multiple weapons at the scene of the crime because he owned multiple weapons, and a lot of these weapons were manufactured by Ratliff himself. He was mostly behind the scenes for FPS Russia, and he also worked for FPS Industries, which is a company that focuses on product development and testing for hard-use firearms shooters. Outspoken gun advocate. We have to talk about this, Lewis, and we have to talk about it in the terms that why didn't his firearms save him?
Because firearms will never save you when someone gets the better of you, right? I mean, if I sneak up behind you with a gun...
It doesn't matter if I'm in a gun shop.
Doesn't matter if you're Rambo or Arnold Schwarzenegger or anyone, really. It doesn't matter. If someone gets the better of you, guns will never keep you safe. I mean, even if you get into a gunfight with someone, like we talked about before, there's this assumption among gun nuts that the good guy always wins. And you know what? Doesn't work that way.
Natan, what will be the right wing, the Larry Pratts, the Larry Wards, the Wayne LaPierres, what would be their equivocation on this tragic story? And just because he had guns and he was a gun advocate, his death is no less tragic. That's the other thing we have to keep in mind, because I'm getting some negative comments about this guy. This guy deserved it. Owning guns doesn't make you deserve to die any more than not owning guns makes you deserve to die, according to those who believe you should own guns, right? In either case, you don't deserve to die.
Well, I think it's, I mean, I find this death a bit more humorous than you do, apparently. I would like to hand this guy a Darwin Award. This is a guy who tweeted, and I'm going to read the tweet here. I went to the movies with my pistol in my pocket. The whole time I was praying that someone would try to pull a Batman.
Well, he seems to have gotten that opportunity, and it didn't go well.
Yeah,
sadly.
suggesting, of course, that with his little pistol in his pocket, he would somehow be a hero when this guy walks into a theater and starts shooting people after throwing smoke grenades in it. Somehow, of course, this guy would persevere.
Natan, what's your thought on what the right-wing equivocation will be?
Well, I think the problem is that they can always resort to their last argument when all of the other ones fail, which is to say that in this particular instance, this particular person who was the victim was just incompetent in how they were able to use the guns. If you were simply more competent like they are, what they don't tell you is that research shows that most people in these situations are unable to do what people like Larry Pratt think that they can do when they're armed.
Right.
I hope that he saw the shooter, and I hope that the last thing that, I wish he hadn't been killed. The ideal situation would have been one in which he saw the shooter, realized he was completely helpless, and then the shooter let him live. And so that maybe he would say, wow, the only thing that would have kept me safe was if that guy didn't have a gun.
I don't think we're going to hear that from anybody.
Right.
Well, you know, in our circles, we'll hear that.
This guy had all the guns in the world and used them all the time. Apparently, this guy was a real pro.
He built guns. He
built
was a
guns.
producer of a gun program.
He brought his gun to the movies.
Right.
This guy was a total badass, obviously. Guess
Sad
not.
story. And, you know, this has to be part of the discussion here. Even if the right-wingers don't care about it, it has to be part of the discussion. Our program is mostly supported by individual memberships. I want to invite you to become a David Pakman Show member. Go to our website, davidpakman.com/membership. You get the bonus show hosted by Lewis as a David Pakman Show member. Today we're going to talk about defense contractors and soldiers who were poisoned by a carcinogen who now are suing a military contractor. And it turns out, this is incredible, that the government may end up having to pay that settlement. And plenty more stories. davidpakman.com/membership. We'll take a break. Stay tuned. Great interviews coming up today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. Please consider becoming a David Pakman Show member, of course made possible in part by liberalbias.com. At liberalbias.com, they show you how to unskew reality and make it easier for conservatives to handle. Liberalbias.com. Today's new member of the day, Zachary Klinger. It's great to have Zachary as a David Pakman Show member. We've had interns named Zachary, but Zachary Klinger is, I think, our first member named Zachary. In any case, time for Worldview with Dennis Campbell. Dennis is editor-in-chief of UK Progressive Magazine, also the host of the brand new show, Worldview with Dennis Campbell at youtube.com/worldviewshow. More about that later. Dennis, let's talk a little bit about the triple dip recession in the United Kingdom. 2 years ago, we were told that a 1% GDP expense cut would lower growth by 0.5%. And it turns out that those numbers were not accurate.
No, they weren't accurate at all. As a matter of fact, what the IMF has come back and said just recently is that it's more like 1.5% against future growth. So for most countries here in the Eurozone where GDP growth has been 1% or less, meaning that or actually no growth, meaning they've been in recession or just coming out of recession, it's been devastating to the economy. And that's the foundation upon which Prime Minister Cameron and several of the other leaders of the Eurozone have progressed, saying that we need to cut. And this austerity craziness here on this side of the pond has now led to a unemployment rate of 11.8% or 18.8 million people unemployed across the Eurozone.
Right,
so
now,
by screwing up those metrics, we're in the middle of an absolutely horrific situation.
Issue one is this idea of what actually is the importance of deficits. If you can get a growing economy, then deficits as a share of that economy will shrink anyway. That's one issue. But the other issue is also, what can we say about cuts relative to growth without any kind of a detail about what types of cuts, right? Because we know that there are certain types of government spending that have much higher multiplier effects in the economy and a much higher stimulative effect. And there are some types of government spending that don't seem to. For example, food stamps versus tax cuts come to mind. What can we say about that?
Well, it's essentially the same here as well, with the same multipliers. I mean, money that is put in the hands of those that are in need, those that are in a benefit situation, is going to come right back, every penny of it, into the economy. If you give a rich person a tax cut, it's just going to go into an investment somewhere, not likely to be spent in the economy, more likely to be saved. And, you know, if you're in a situation where, you know, basically we're all Keynesians now because we really need to do something to stimulate growth, not just here in the Eurozone, but in the United States and around the globe. What you're seeing is with the continued attacks on union rules, the right to work states that you're seeing in the States, you're getting a lot of very, very cheap labor. But unfortunately, that labor is so cheap, no one is in a position to actually earn enough income to then pour it back into the economy. I mean, we're paying in excess of $9 a gallon for petrol here. And that's just an insane amount of money. And when people are forced to, to choose between, can I put gas in my car to drive to work, or, am I going to have fresh fruit and vegetables on my table? They're making a lot of very, very tough choices.
What is the implication here longer term? I mean, in other words, is there any analysis going on that says normally the 1% expense cut to 0.5% growth lowering would hold true? In this case, it didn't because of some specific circumstances, or is the broader equation kind of being rethought?
Well, that's the question. It's not really being rethought by the current government, the Tories, who are very much like your GOP Republican Party. They are still very much convinced that it's just a matter of time before the economy begins to jumpstart itself. But in the meantime, all the plush contracts are going to their friends and their pals to, redefine the National Health Service, which is being gutted because a lot of services are being privatized. We're seeing police forces being privatized. We're seeing police commissions being privatized. So a lot of the things that you normally take for granted there, the fact that your prison systems and the like are all run by private companies, that's all just starting here. And there's no incentive on the part of the government here because there's no outrage. I mean, there should be rioting in the streets if you see, the fact that the rest of the world is beginning to slowly recover, and we as a nation here in the United Kingdom are headed into a third recession, a triple-dip recession. That's just insane.
Yeah, you certainly have a lot to look forward to when it comes to private prison ownership, that's for sure. Dennis, today is the debut episode of Worldview with Dennis Campbell, youtube.com/worldview show. You've got 2 great interviews lined up. Tell us briefly about them.
Yes, we do. We've been fortunate. I've known Professor Juan Cole, who is the U.S.'s preeminent Middle Eastern expert, for several years, and he was the first phone call I made when we were going to have this show. And he gives us about a 14-minute interview and discussion on what's happening in Syria, what's happening in Gaza. It's really must-see television for anybody interested in trying to understand. And Juan has agreed to come back later in the month of January for a further discussion as we get closer to the 2-year anniversary of the Egyptian Revolution. The second guest, and one of the things we'd like to strive for, is to have a serious guest as well as a bit more of an eclectic look at things. The Dutch nutritionist and life coach Carola van Bemmelen joins us, and we talk about the impact of sugar. Now, many of your listeners and viewers are out there doing things for the new year in terms of resolutions, losing weight, taking better care of themselves. Some of the things that Carola talks about where we find sugar will absolutely stun your audience, because, I mean, it's in things like toothpaste, it's in things like meat and pet food, and the very sinister nature of the way the sugar industry addicts people will be discussed in this segment. So I hope folks will join in.
All right, so check that out. You can go right now, subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/worldview show. We've been speaking with Dennis Campbell, editor-in-chief of UK Progressive Magazine. Thanks, Dennis, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.
Christian fundamentalists are freaking out over yoga in the military. This is such a weird story, but we know the culprits here. Tony Perkins, the head of the Family Research Council, remember, this is the right-wing Christian think tank that is classified as a hate group, is flipping out over this new initiative that the U.S. military is testing, which is yoga and meditation classes. It's called the Mind Fitness Training Program. The U.S. military is testing integrating yoga, breathing classes, meditation, alongside all of the more traditional regimes to keep soldiers calm, mentally fit, reduce depression, use of alcohol and drugs. Now, as we know, this is a huge problem in the military. Suicide rate 1 per day, more likely to commit suicide in the military than to be killed in combat. Perkins says this is not good. This is just an attempt to replace one's relationship with God, which should be really what keeps you sane in the military, with things that he considers to be wacky. I mean, he calls these wacky substitutes. I think what's at the core of this is yoga sounds kind of feminine and gay to the Family Research Council. I think that's what they don't like, Lewis.
Probably. I mean, if they have done any research about yoga, they'd realize there is really no religious component It's
Well, that's the problem they have. They want soldiers to be focusing on church and praying instead of yoga.
so they'd rather have a church go read a fairy tale and pray to whatever
Right.
than do some important exercises that might actually help them physically and physiologically.
That's exactly right. I mean, somebody should tell Tony Perkins that the faith thing is not keeping up its end of the bargain with soldiers, right? Like I said, mental health of members of the military is a huge problem. Suicide rate skyrocketing in the last couple of years. In 2012, 1 suicide a day. But, yoga's just a wacky substitute. I think what it really means is we need more people praying, and yoga sounds kind of feminine and gay. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, probably. You know what? I would much rather have our soldiers talking to yoga instructors than to anyone related to any religious organization.
I agree 100% with you.
Yeah.
No question about it. I think the fact that Tony Perkins is so against this is a really good indicator that the military is actually doing a good thing.
Oh, yes, of course. The more outraged he is, the better things are getting.
Almost by definition.
Yeah.
Join us on Facebook, facebook.com/David Pakman Show. Let's take a break. When we come back, I will argue, I'm guessing it will be an argument, with the chairman of Gun Appreciation Day. Stay tuned. That's coming up next.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Joining me is Larry Ward. He is the chairman of Gun Appreciation Day, also the president of Political Media Incorporated. Larry, what is Gun Appreciation Day? When is it? But most importantly, why?
Well, Gun Appreciation Day is simply a way for citizens to go out and show their appreciation for the Second Amendment, to go out to gun ranges, gun shows, gun shops, and buy a few bullets, shoot a few bullets, and bring your, like we say, bring your hands off my gun signs, and send a message to not only the president, but also members of Congress who would infringe upon your Second Amendment right.
Do you buy into just to get you on the record as a yes or no here, do you buy into the theories that President Obama or the White House or the administration was somehow involved in either planning or allowing Sandy Hook to happen for political gain? Do you buy into that at all?
No.
Okay, good. All right, good.
If I certainly hope that our police and our media would be a little more responsible to not hide facts from a case.
Let's talk about the Second Amendment, which you alluded to at first, and I think this is a good time to talk about it. To you, does the Second Amendment mean that people should be allowed to own any weapon?
Yes.
It does.
Yes.
So this includes weapons of mass destruction, Apache helicopters, all that stuff.
No.
It doesn't. So you said yes, but now you say no. Which is it?
I do not believe that an individual should have a nuclear weapon. It's so ridiculous.
Okay, but forget about the nuclear weapon.
Right now we have 20,000 laws.
Yeah.
Okay, 20,000 laws on the books for gun control. Those 20,000 laws failed. They failed in Virginia Tech. They failed in Aurora. They failed at the Sikh Temple. They failed in Newtown. And those people's lives were lost because those gun control measures failed.
But Larry, I want to keep the focus as narrow because I think this is a big deal with the Second Amendment. Forget about the laws for a second. So you said yes, it should mean any weapon, but not nuclear weapons. So that's a restriction you're putting on there. Where did you get that specific restriction?
Here's where did I get that restriction?
Yeah.
First of all, the average ordinary citizen doesn't have the capability. It's a ridiculous argument.
I don't think, I don't think it is. So let's take it a step down then. Forget for a second about the nuclear weapon.
We're talking
what about IEDs, for example? Would it be okay for humans to, individuals, Americans, to have IEDs? Well,
here's the thing: the Second Amendment is very clear. It's the only amendment it's the only amendment in the Constitution that has the word "shall not be infringed."
Okay.
And the Second Amendment was put together for three reasons. One, so that people can defend themselves and their property. 2, so that people could, America could defend itself from a would-be foreign invader. And 3, so that America could defend itself from a potential tyrant that would take over our government. And, those 3 things, matter of fact, the absolute best statement I've ever seen was from Judge Napolitano, who I'm personally supporting and promoting.
I'm sure, but Larry, we're getting way off track here.
Hold on. Let me finish my thought here for a second. Who I'm personally promoting to be the next president of the United States. He said that the Second Amendment is the right to shoot tyrants, not the right to kill deer. That's a powerful statement, because that is what the Second Amendment is.
But Larry, again, we're way off track. You said you were coming back to the point. I'm not hearing it.
We get back to the nuclear weapon here. Okay, if the United States government or a foreign government were to use a nuclear weapon against its people, then I'd be all for retaliating with a nuclear weapon from the citizens. But we're not talking about nuclear warfare. It's not or mutually assured destruction. We're talking about gun rights.
The thing is, though, if those were the initial 3 reasons for the Second Amendment, why did the Supreme Court have to rule for the first time in 2008 that the Second Amendment means citizens have a right to guns, not for militia use? In other words, legally, up until just a few years ago, all those things you just cited weren't true. It sounds like we're getting very mixed up here.
Well, that's the reason the Founding Fathers created. It's very clear. It's very clear.
But then if it was so clear, why did the Supreme Court have to rule on it just 4 years ago?
The Supreme Court makes mistakes. They made a big mistake, recently with Obamacare.
Okay, but let's hold on a second, Larry. Obamacare has nothing to do with this. I want to get back to my main point here, which is this.
You said the Supreme Court is the end-all, be-all. I'm saying that the Supreme Court makes mistakes.
I think with regard to the Second Amendment, we really have 2 options here. Either the Second Amendment means that people can own the weapons that were available at the time the Second Amendment was written, aka muskets, or it means anyone can own any weapon that exists. Anything else, Larry, hold on a second, let me finish my thought. Anything else is a totally subjective evaluation you or anyone else is doing. And therefore, why is it any more subjective for President Obama or anyone else to ban assault weapons than for you to say nuclear weapons aren't part of it?
Because of the reason I just said. If there was any precedent and the government used a nuclear suitcase against its citizens, then I would be for having a citizen use a nuclear suitcase against the government.
But the government has used nuclear weapons against other countries. Why against its own? I think, Larry, that this is making no sense to me. I think we're not getting an answer from you here.
Hypothesis that citizens are going to make nukes in their basement. That's not the case. We're talking about the right to bear guns.
Has the government used assault weapons against citizens in any kind of attack or oppression?
Have guns. Because we have guns. Look at every single country.
But Larry, this makes no sense. Does this make sense to anybody? Larry, are you making any sense here? What about a tank? Has the government ever used a tank against Americans?
No, because we have arms.
So then Americans should be able to have tanks, right? Because that's one that's not been used. Well, this is silly, Larry.
I understand where you're going with this. I actually have another interview.
How convenient, I'm sure.
What's that?
How convenient, Larry. Okay. So I guess what we're getting to here is Gun Appreciation Day is funded by you. You've decided what weapons the Second Amendment does and doesn't allow, but you're not okay with President Obama doing that, and I guess that's where we're getting.
The Constitution says that.
Well, the Constitution says either they're all okay or only muskets are okay, but you're apparently putting more
information.
Okay,
so the free you apply that to the First Amendment. They only had newspapers. Matter of fact, I think a few of them, 2 or 3 of them. So they only had newspapers back then. So the First Amendment only applies to print newspapers, or does it apply to the internet?
No, well, that's the thing. That we actually can answer that. I said the Second Amendment either applies to what existed or to all forms of speech, and clearly it applies to all forms of speech. The difference is, with the Second Amendment, you're saying, no, it's neither of those. It's an in-between, that it's okay for you to decide, but not the president. It makes no sense. It doesn't stand up, Larry.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
All right, Larry, Larry deciding to end the interview. Larry Ward, chairman of Gun Appreciation Day, certainly not liking the direction that it went, but we do appreciate, there he is, he cut us off. We appreciate him being on. It's too bad that this didn't he's been doing so many interviews, but Apparently, he was able to sit through all of them, except for this one, until the end. We'll take a break. Stay tuned. Back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. We are just getting this breaking news in that another shooting has erupted at a high school in California. 2 people are hurt. This happened within the last 60 minutes. Gunfire erupted Thursday at a school in inland Kern County in a shooting where 2 people were injured, according to county officials. Media reports are that the assailant has been arrested. The sheriff's dispatcher confirmed the shooting took place at Taft Union High School. No other details so far. The fire chief says there are 2 wounded, including one that was airlifted to a nearby hospital. This, of course, coming after December's Sandy Hook shooting. Tensions, of course, running very high in Arizona. Sheriff Joe Arpaio getting armed posses to protect schools, as he describes it. We are getting news that the news stations found out about this because some individuals inside of the school called the TV stations. Still very early. We're going to have more information, at least it appears now, and this could change, that no one has been killed in this shooting. Right.
That one person who was airlifted, I guess, did sustain a lot of damage.
So it's not guaranteed that they will survive.
Right. But one of the rare instances in which a school shooter is captured
Apprehended.
alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that, we'll have to see what happens, but that could prove to be, it could lead to some interesting questions.
Could prove to be very valuable.
It could, yeah.
Yeah.
We have news that a 300-meter wide asteroid is going to make a close pass to the Earth. This is the, I don't know if it's pronounced Apophis or Apophis. I'm not sure. Or maybe it's neither of those. It's named after the Egyptian demon of destruction and darkness. It's on a watch list now for scientists. They've calculated that in 2036, there's a small chance it could actually collide with the Earth. Right now, its current flyby is a safe 14 million kilometers, which is really considered a pretty near miss in cosmic terms, Louis.
Right.
It will not be visible to the naked eye. Space enthusiasts will be able to watch online via the SLU Space Camera website. It will not be visible unless it actually hits the Earth, in which case I would assume for a very short period of time it will be visible.
1 in 200,000 chance.
Now
that it will
that's
hit
not
the Earth.
that small of a chance.
I think that's pretty high.
It's like if we say, you know, it's not even 1 in a million, don't worry about it. 1 in 200,000 is, it's a chance. It really is.
It's pretty significant.
I would actually say,
I hope they're wrong.
if the odds were, would you live your life different? Okay, let's take it a step back. Would you do anything different now based on this 1 in 200,000 chance from now until 2029 or 2036?
Doubt it.
No. If the odds were 1 in 20 that this was going to hit Earth in this amount of time, in 17 to 25 years, would you live your life differently starting now?
If it was just a few scientists who said it was 1 in 20, or if it was across
Let's say
the
the
board,
consensus was 1 in 20.
yes, I would do things very differently.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
And what if it was in 5 years, 1 in 20?
In 5 years,
And it was but it's 1 in 20. It's a 5% chance.
I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now.
Natan, what about you? I mean, 5% chance that in 25 years, hypothetically, we get hit by this asteroid. Do you do anything differently?
I wouldn't do anything differently in the short term, just because it's pretty
Yeah.
far away. But
That-
if it were 5 years from now, I definitely would do things differently.
Even at 1 in 20?
Yeah.
Really? Even though it's a 95% chance that nothing will happen?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, fair enough. A $1 million lottery winner has been fatally poisoned by cyanide. His name is Uruj Khan. He died a few months ago, the day after the state issued a check to him for $425,000, which was the after-tax lump sum payment on the winning ticket. The check wasn't cashed until about a month later, after he had died, likely by a member of his estate. So there was an initial exam done by the Cook County Medical Examiner, and it said there was no trauma, no unusual substances in the 46-year-old's body, basically saying natural causes. He was buried. Within a week, a relative asked the medical examiner to take another look at this, saying, "We have concerns that this was a natural death. Please look harder." They did a comprehensive toxicology report, and it turned up that some cyanide had been ingested, an amount that would be deadly for humans, and this has now been reclassified as a homicide, not as a suicide. Presumably, it would be unusual to commit suicide the day after winning $1 million in the lottery.
Yes, if you want someone else to have that money, you can just give it to them.
He planned to give. He planned to actually. He owned dry cleaners, and he was going to invest most of the money into his business and then donate some to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. I would probably want to remain anonymous. I think if I won like the huge Powerball, I actually would want to remain anonymous. But you would think if you win $425,000. It's not an amount where you're all of a sudden the target. You don't have a huge target, I would assume. But maybe it's better to remain anonymous in all cases when you win the lottery. I don't know.
I think it is. Poor guy. I mean, killed by presumably a member of his own family.
You think?
Well, of course. They wanted the money. Right?
Interesting.
I mean, he gets inherited.
Yeah.
Sad.
Very, very sad.
Yeah.
Would you? What would be the threshold at which you would remain anonymous if you won the lottery? What dollar amount?
I'd remain anonymous no matter how much it was.
You win $20, you don't even mention it to a friend.
That's right, because it's either an insignificant amount, so insignificant that I don't need to mention it to anyone, or so much that I don't want to, attract any attention to myself.
If you win $6,000, that would be enough. Where it's not usual to win $6,000 in the lottery.
I'd remain anonymous, but I would tell,
personal contact.
I'd tell you.
Okay, Natan, what's your threshold?
Probably about 5,000. Over that, I probably wouldn't tell. I would probably tell a few people close to me, but not anyone else.
My threshold, $7,200, $56. Anything above that, I'm not saying a word.
I won't ask you why.
$7,255 though, I'll announce it on the show.
All right.
Let's go to voicemail. Our voicemail line available to you 24 hours a day. The number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Earlier in the week, the Eggman was asking about how to bring marijuana on planes. Well, somebody heard that, and they have a suggestion. Take a listen to this.
Hey guys, it's Steve in North Troy, Vermont. Great show. I think I got a solution for Eggman's dilemma. Just roll them up, put them in your sock, and they'll take your shoes off, but rarely your socks, especially in winter. And with the 223 caliber from the Bushmaster, did you know that 22s are outlawed by the Geneva Convention? So what did the U.S. military do? They added 3/1000ths, or the thickness of a hair or piece of paper, a very large cartridge for propellant, and made a very, very sick round with that.
I didn't know that, actually. That it was the reason it's a 223 is to make it legally not a 22.
I did not know that.
Interesting. If it's true, it's compelling. Here is today's daily anti-Semitic voicemail. No, not daily. Here's a guy who thinks it's funny to imitate me having, I guess, what is a stereotypical New York Jewish accent. Of course, I was born in Argentina and have never lived in New York. I moved to Massachusetts, so why it's associated with me, I guess, is simply because I'm Jewish. This individual does not like the show, apparently. Take a listen to this.
You need to get a job and stop posting your videos. Oy vey, I'm David Pakman. Am I not entitled? Is it not kosher? Oh.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that input, and I think that this is certainly an individual who I hope is being, that I hope a number of organizations come to this individual for insight on a number of matters, medical, science, all sorts of stuff, because he clearly is the type of person you need advising you.
Well, you know what? We've had far worse voicemails.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have. Listen, that is going to do it for today's show. I think that there will be fallout from the Chairman of Gun Appreciation Day interview. I hope that that is going to be posted far and wide. I hope that you will get your name on the record as a supporter of the David Pakman Show. The way you do that is you go to our website, davidpakman.com/membership, and you sign up. You say, yes, put me down for a few bucks a month. Put me down for a yearly membership. I support alternative independent media. I believe it is important, and I want the David Pakman Show to continue to grow. And I'm going to make that happen. I'm voting with my dollars. That's the best way that you can continue the growth of alternative independent media. One more time, you go to davidpakman.com/membership and you sign up. That's it for this week. We have a great week of programming coming up next week. We will see you then. Leave us your voicemails, send us your emails, and we'll talk to you on Monday afternoon.
David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.